Hey, this is Off the Cuff, and I'm Steve from TorahFamily.org. Today we want to cover some questions that we received regarding our teaching titled Satan's Greatest Masquerade. If you have not seen that teaching, well, you're going to want to, because this teaching is answering questions from that teaching. So, let's get right to it. The first question that was brought to us was regarding some verses in Daniel that makes it appear that it's the anti-Messiah who is actually abolishing the sacrifices, whereas in this teaching, we bring forth that we think it's actually Yeshua. So let's go forth and look at some of these verses. The verses are Daniel chapter 11, verse 31, and Daniel 12, verse 11. These verses definitely makes it look like the anti-Messiah is the one who abolishes the sacrifices in the English. However, the Hebrew word in these verses carries a different meaning. The word used in these verses actually means to set aside. However, Daniel 9:27 gives a clear understanding that the sacrifices are brought to an end. At first glance, we could say, well, no big deal. However, we believe it is a big deal. We can't forget that Daniel wrote all three of these references. It seems that Daniel would have used the same word in all three of these references if they were to mean the same thing. As it is, he didn't. My current understanding is that Daniel 11:31 and Daniel 12:11 are not talking about something which is already set in place, but rather what should be set up. Okay, let me explain. I truly believe the tent and the ark will be set back up. At that moment, they have the option to set the sacrifices up properly. However, they set aside the proper way of doing the sacrifices. This results in setting it all up in an abominable way. So the proper way is turned away or set aside, as the word implies in Daniel 11:31 and Daniel 12:11, which again is different from the word given in Daniel 9:27, which means to cease or to bring an end to. So again, we believe these verses and Daniel 11 and 12 are not talking about something that is already set up, but rather what should be set up, but which in turn is not. And that makes them set up in abomination to Yahweh. And we believe quite possibly that that abomination is what Yeshua himself brings to an end. He's the one who brings those to an end, as mentioned in verse 27, as we talked about in the previous teaching, when he conquers Jerusalem. Okay, when he takes over Jerusalem and begins his reigning as king from there. So hopefully that all makes sense regarding those two verses, how those verses are talking about something that's set aside. When something should be done, they set the truth aside. And that sets up the abomination. Yeshua comes in behind and brings those sacrifices, abomination, to an end. There we see the two words being spoken of. One set aside, one is brought to an end. So Daniel himself makes a distinction, I believe, between these verses. Okay. Now, another question that is brought up is regarding the 144,000. The question was, you see the 144,000 on physical Mount Zion with Yeshua in Revelation 14:1. Is it possible that the Mount Zion mentioned is spiritual Mount Zion in heaven, because in Revelation 14:3 it says they are before the throne and they have been redeemed from the earth? Wouldn't the throne be in heaven? Revelation 14:1 says they are on Mount Zion. Then verse 2 says the sound was heard from heaven. Verse 3 implies they, meaning the 144,000, were singing. However, the Greek does not have they. It simply says singing was coming from around the throne where the four creatures were. Then verse 3 says no one could learn the song except the 144,000. This implies to us it wasn't the 144,000 singing, as they had to learn it. So the singing was heard from heaven, as verse 2 says, and it was only the 144,000 who could learn that which was being heard from heaven. Verse 4 says the 144,000 follows wherever the Lamb goes. This would seem to be down here on earth and not in heaven. Plus, just because it says the 144,000 were purchased from among men, it doesn't mean they're in heaven. They can still be on earth. They're just with Yeshua. Another question that we've received is, do we see Revelation chapter 7 and Revelation chapter 14 actually describing the same event? We tend to lean that Revelation chapter 14 actually takes place after Yeshua conquers Jerusalem. Okay, after at that moment, he begins ruling and reigning from there. And this is where we see this all kind of like the time frame, right in that time frame, just after he conquers Jerusalem and he begins to rule and reign. We see that part of Revelation 14 really discussing that time frame of Yeshua's rule. Now, regarding the 144,000, we believe Israel will be numbered, just as they were in the book of Numbers. In that numbering, the Levites were not numbered for war, yet they were still numbered. They were numbered for their duties in the temple. Now, we know there are some who do not believe the temple services will be reinstated by Yeshua. However, Yeshua said nothing would disappear from the law until heaven and earth disappear. Plus, he also told his disciples to follow Moses not long before he was crucified. If the temple services were going to be done away with through his sacrifice, why didn't Yeshua say it, especially here? Yet, on the contrary, he said the opposite. There is so much more that could be said here on this topic, but we want to move forward with the topic at hand. So if you disagree, please know that we respectfully view the scriptures differently. The next question that is brought up is, if Judah is being protected in Edom, why the need for Yeshua to save them first before entering into Jerusalem, as mentioned in Zechariah chapter 12, verse 7? We believe quite possibly that Edom surrounds Judah just as the anti-Messiah surrounds Yeshua at Mount Sinai. In Isaiah 34, we see where judgment falls on Edom on the day of Armageddon. But why? It would seem that they are protecting Judah, right? Actually, no. Judah flees there because of being refugees. Now, even though Edom escapes control of the anti-Messiah could still be threatening Edom to say, look, you got to hand them over, okay? Thus, Edom will surround Judah, just as the anti-Messiah surrounds Yeshua at Mount Sinai with the 144,000 and all the others with them there, okay? His bride. So again, just as the anti-Messiah will surround, because I'm talking the day of Armageddon here, Armageddon, just as the anti-Messiah surrounds Yeshua and his bride around that mountain, Judah will be surrounded by Edom just the same. In fact, one can't help but wonder if the anti-Messiah would say something like this to Edom. If you don't hand them over to me, I'm coming for you after I'm done at Sinai. Now, there's no scripture that says this. Okay, I'm just wondering. You can't help but wonder if this could be a way it could be playing out. But this adds to the thought of, if the days were not cut short, no one would survive. It seems that no matter where the Jews have gone, the enemy has tried to wipe them out. That being said, could Yeshua's statement be concerning Judah only, or be inclusive of all believers around the world? Now, I'm not sure. I can easily see it both ways, actually. Yet, as mentioned in our teaching, Armageddon and the Parousia, we see how there will be survivors from all over the world for sure. But now consider the verses in Isaiah, how Yeshua saves Judah from Edom on the day of Armageddon. Isaiah 34. Come near, you nations, and listen. Pay attention, you peoples. Let the earth hear, and all that is in it, the world, and all that comes out of it. Yahweh is angry with all nations. His wrath is upon all their armies. He will totally destroy them. He will give them over to slaughter. Their slain will be thrown out. Their dead bodies will send up a stench. The mountains will be soaked with their blood. All the stars of the heavens will be dissolved, and the sky rolled up like a scroll. All the starry host will fall like withered leaves from the vine, like shriveled figs from the fig tree. My sword has drunk its fill in the heavens. See, it descends in judgment on Edom, the people I have totally destroyed. The sword of Yahweh is bathed in blood. It is covered with fat, the blood of lambs and goats, fat from the kidneys of rams. For Yahweh has a sacrifice in Basra, and a great slaughter in Edom. And the wild oxen will fall with them, the bull calves and the great bulls. Their land will be drenched with blood, and the dust will be soaked with fat. For Yahweh has a day of vengeance, a year of retribution, to uphold Zion's cause. Edom's streams will be turned into pitch, her dust into burning sulfur. Her land will become a blazing pitch. It will not be quenched night and day. Its smoke will rise forever. From generation to generation, it will lie desolate. No one will ever pass through it again. Now, we've also been asked to cover Daniel 9:26 in more detail to better understand why we are where we're at with Daniel 9:27. Now, we believe it's the first two sentences in verse 26 that are the most misunderstood. The first part here is covered in detail in our PDF titled Cut Short. In short, this does not say the Anointed One, the ruler, as given in the previous verse. There are only 8 Hebrew words for this section of the verse. The direct translation is, after weeks 6, 2, to cut off, anointed is not 2. We must take note that while verse 25 speaks of the anointed ruler, verse 26 speaks only of an anointed. What anointed is this speaking of? We can't forget, Yahweh's people are also considered the anointed. This is found in 1 Chronicles and the book of Psalms. We believe verse 26 is better understood that it's talking about the children of Israel who are no longer to be cut off, namely the northern kingdom. Again, this is covered in detail in our PDF Cut Short. The next question would be, who are these people who destroy the city? Since it says these are the people of the ruler who is to come, and we believe that ruler to be Yeshua, who are these people and why do they destroy the city and the sanctuary? To answer this question, we need to look at history. Yahweh judged his people through the Babylonian invasion and the Roman invasion. Both times the city and sanctuary were destroyed. It was in judgment. The only difference this time is that it will be his invasion because this time he's taking over for his rightful position. Thus, his people, his army, will destroy the city and the sanctuary. Yeshua is cleaning house here. It's happening just as judgment fell on his people when they lived in rebellion and he destroyed the previous temples. The same applies here. I believe this part of verse 26 is very reminiscent of what we see in Ezekiel 8:14 through 9:10. However, I do not believe this is what Ezekiel is being shown. In Ezekiel 9:9, the people believe Yahweh is not looking upon them. Whereas in the end-time deception, people will believe Yahweh's blessings are on them. I would strongly encourage you to read Ezekiel 8:14 through 9:10 for a comparison. There have been some who struggle with the thought that the Anti-Messiah will be ruling and reigning while Yeshua is with his bride at Mount Sinai. But to get a better understanding on that, please see our teaching, Armageddon and the Parousia, and the teaching, King of the North. Now that being said, we actually see this exemplified in the life of David. While Saul is reigning as king in Jerusalem, we see David is anointed as king. Remember, Yeshua is noted as the anointed ruler who will come. So, just as David was anointed to be king while Saul was in that position, we can see a parallel with Yeshua and the anti-Messiah. In conclusion, I would like to bring one last thought that I believe needs to be considered. As mentioned earlier, there are some who believe Yeshua will reign as priest when he comes, even though that really contradicts what Matthew chapter 5 says, where he says in Matthew chapter 5. Plus, we know that Isaiah and Micah say the exact same thing regarding the law when Yeshua reigns. It says, "Many peoples will come and say, 'Come, let us go up to the mountain of Yahweh, to the house of the God of Jacob. He will teach us his ways, so that we may walk in his paths. The law will go out from Zion, the word of Yahweh from Jerusalem.'" Again, there is much more that could be said on this topic alone, but we will save that for another teaching. However, on this note, we have a concern. If one comes forth claiming to be Messiah and declares he is also the new high priest, which makes him over the sacrificial system, what would this be? It will be what we discussed at the beginning of this teaching. It will be the anti-Messiah setting aside what should be done, and thus establishing a sacrificial system that is abominable in the eyes of Yahweh. Judah knows the Messiah will not break the law. Thus, this could be when they flee. We can't forget, what was the first recorded murder in the Bible over? Right and wrong sacrifices. Why was Saul's kingdom not established over Israel? Because he himself did sacrifices. So, will the anti-Messiah do the same as King Saul? Will this be the abomination that takes place and deceives the people? We really don't know. Nobody knows what this abomination will truly be. But let it be known, Yahweh's word is forever, according to Isaiah. All of his word, not part of it, not just some of it. All of his word is forever. And this is what Peter preached. Please remember, Yahweh's word is forever. A friend of mine recently told me that he sees the anti-Messiah will actually bring in a fake anti-Messiah, so that whenever he, meaning the real anti-Messiah, comes in, they'll accept him as the Messiah. I don't know if that makes sense. Let me try to say it one more time, because when he said it, I'm going, whoa, this is like kind of deep. But it made sense. Again, what he said was, he sees the anti-Messiah, the true anti-Messiah, that he'll bring in a fake anti-Messiah. He'll let this fake anti-Messiah almost do his thing. And the world will see this guy as the anti-Messiah, though he's not the real anti-Messiah. Then the real anti-Messiah comes in to saves the day, if you will. Okay, save the day. And so it makes you think if that could be how things will happen. Again, we're talking about deception here, folks. Okay, the very elect would be deceived if that were possible. So, everyone's what? We're all looking for an anti-Messiah. So it only makes sense that the anti-Messiah will bring in someone false as a false anti-Messiah and make the world believe that's the bad guy, if you will. And then he comes in to present himself as the good guy. Now, is that how it's going to happen? I have no idea. But it got me thinking. I'm going, wow, that is just really deep. I'm going to have to think about this for a while. So I'm just sharing with you. Think about it, ponder it. I don't know if it's true, but something for us to definitely be considering. Well, in all of this, that's all I have. So think about it. Pray about it. But more than anything, be a doer of the word and not a hearer only. Until next time, Shalom.